is a little area called Kupari, and these are all old hotels. It was a huge resort area in the 80s up until 1991 when it was all bombed, but it was built in the 80s and the 60s, and that little building in the middle there was built in it was a brick factory and was turned into a hotel in the 20s. But you can see this is a beautiful beach, but all these buildings were bombed in 1991 to 1995, somewhere around there, and they're just abandoned, and you can just go like walk around on them. So we're gonna go walk around in them. And of course you have a beach bar, which is still open and not bombed, because everybody needs a cocktail. But you can see the water is gorgeous, and these hotels are just amazing. Pretty neat. This is a little area called Kupari, and these are all old hotels. It was a huge resort area in the 80s up until 1991 when it was all bombed, but it was built in the 80s and the 60s, and that little building in the middle there was built in it was a brick factory and was turned into a hotel in the 20s. But you can see this is a beautiful beach, but all these buildings were bombed in 1991 to 1995, somewhere around there, and they're just abandoned, and you can just go like walk around on them. So we're gonna go walk around in them. And of course you have a beach bar, which is still open and not bombed, because everybody needs a cocktail. But you can see the water is gorgeous, and these hotels are just amazing. Pretty neat. This is the Hotel Goricina. It was built in 1986 and it was firebombed in 1991. So it was only open for about 5 years. It's pretty amazing. All the stuff is just like open to the public. You can just go walk around wherever you want. It's not very safe, but the Trump graffiti way up at the top there is a little disconcerting. But what are you gonna do? This is just one of 5 hotels that are here. This is a former brick factory turned into a hotel by the Czechoslovakian government in 1920. Yugoslavian government allowed Czechoslovakia to turn it into a hotel. You can see there's a lot of shrapnel and bullet hole marks, a couple of impact craters. But this was a brick factory in the 1800s, and they made brick and roof tiles.
The building is made of brick.
Yeah, the building is made of brick. And Kupari, where we are, Kupari is translates into roof tile. No.
I'm not going in there. Who's in there?
Yeah, these are the wine cellars.
Did you go eating?
Yeah.
Can't see.
These are the old wine cellars underneath the old hotel. Big old bread ovens or some kind of oven. This building is it's historically recognized, so they're gonna keep it. They have to keep it, and I guess they're gonna fix it up. It's gonna take a lot to fix it up, but they are not allowed to knock it down, as opposed to these other hotels, which they're just gonna knock all down, which were built in the 60s and the 80s. This one's from the 1800s. This is one of the hotels from 1986. It was opened in 86, closed in 81. We're gonna go in and look at the Olympic-sized swimming pool. It was one of the first Olympic-sized swimming pools in this area. Very like Walking Dead in here. Well, it did rain.
You didn't know what happened, you might just assume it was abandoned.
Yeah.
Like, not that it was bombed.
Yep.
Because it's been a long enough time that things sort of look like this is becoming a building, which it is.
Olympic-sized swimming pool. They used to have national contests here, competitions, swimming competitions, all kinds of stuff in the late 80s. So I think I have my history right when I say that this was all these hotels, pretty much all the hotels in this whole area of Croatia were built by the Yugoslavian government in like the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And then in the Homeland War, I took a tour yesterday, I'm trying to remember. In the Homeland War in 91, when Croatia declared independence with Montenegro from Yugoslavia, the Yugoslavian Army came and bombed here as a way of economic damage for the area to take away tourism money. Because up until Croatia declared independence, this was actually a military resort. Not originally, it was originally just a regular resort, but then the Yugoslavian government took it over and used it as a military resort for thousands and thousands of Yugoslavian military families. And then when Croatia declared independence, they took it back from the Yugoslavian government, and then Yugoslavia decided to blow it all up. I think that's the story. Apologize if I got it wrong. This hotel was built in the 60s, and it's covered in the local brach stone, totally covered in this like white, beautiful white stone. This is the one that was built in the 80s. You can see it's not quite as architecturally interesting. Not that this one is...
Very brutalist.
Yeah, they're very brutalist, very 60s, very Yugoslavian government. Very sort of Eastern Bloc design. This was designed by, I can't remember his name, David Pinci, I think. He's a pretty famous architect. He came to the United States. He designed some buildings for Columbia University, I think. We're gonna go up in there in a minute. You can see these buildings are built more for purpose. Thousands of beds in that one, thousands of beds in this one. So this place was hopping in the 70s and the 80s. Just a little bit different perspective. We're down below the big hotel from the 60s on like a little, like a boat ramp. And like a little harbor kind of thing, boathouse.
this looks like poison sumac.
We just walked up from that beach. This is the hotel from the 60s, and you can see the shelling, like the impact marks, like up there. They were bombed from the sea, from the Yugoslavian Navy. You can see where they were bombed, like up there. See the shrapnel marks in the native stone. And this place was fully occupied when it happened. Amazing cactus. So this side of the hotel was damaged the worst. And this was in 91. And then I guess the Croatian government took over this whole site afterwards and was still here. They still used a lot of the buildings. Like the buildings weren't this bad until about 20 years ago, 2001, I think he said, the tour guide I had yesterday. And he said in 2001, the military, they just walked away. They left all the windows and doors open. And the locals came and liberated the wiring and the plumbing and the furniture and a lot of the stone stairways and all the beautiful stone. You can see this is all covered in the brooch stone, which I think is quarried near here. I guess people can come up here and camp. And over there, straight across, is where we're staying. That's Savtat over there. So that's where we're staying. So all we did was this morning was just drive up the Dalmatian Coast Road up to here, and we're about halfway to Dubrovnik, which I think we're going to maybe do tomorrow. And then out there are the Elipiti Islands that we are going to do a boat tour out to as well, like a day trip boat tour. But first we have to go see the abandoned hotel complex, which is arguably more my thing than Tabitha's thing, but it's kind of interesting. You can see the solar panels up in the back there. This place apparently had state-of-the-art solar. It had state-of-the-art water filtration. The whole place was sort of self-sufficient, which is a real shame. It was like way ahead of even where resorts are now in terms of self-sufficiency. So the Yugoslavian government did some things right, I guess, when they built all these. Down in Savtat where we're staying, there are 3 other Yugoslavian hotels. The Albatross, the Hotel Croatia, and the Epidaurus. And you can tell, I'll take some pictures of those later, but you can tell they also were built by the Yugoslavian government architecturally. All right, moving on. We're inside that hotel from the 60s. And I just love these floors. They're all stone. Just beautiful stone. A lot of these floors were stolen after the military left. I mean, just look at these. Beautiful. I mean, the rest of it's not, but maybe I just like the contrast. Can I get you a cocktail? I was joking with the tour guide yesterday that in America, none of this would be allowed. You wouldn't be allowed to go in any of these places, much less to the edge of an old terrace. Beautiful though. That water is very inviting. We may have to go dip our toes in It's very hard here to figure out whether you want to go sightseeing and drive around and go see things and get all hot and sweaty, or just sit on the beach all day.
Yeah.
But we live at the beach, so we should probably go see the things. That water sure does look nice. Okay, that's pretty much the tour. That's all of it. All I saw yesterday anyway, but we did an abbreviated version for Tabitha. I got to bore her for a good hour with too much information. I was just telling her that back in the 60s, President Tito, who was president of Yugoslavia, came out here with, he would have, this was called Tito's Hawaii, and it was sort of his resort. I mean, it was taken over by the military, and that's why it was all built by the military, owned by the military, run by the military. It was a military resort for military families, but Yasser Arafat came here, Gaddafi came here, Sophia Loren, Elizabeth Taylor, all the big monkey mucks that dictators like to hang around with. And other dictators, because dictators like to hang out with dictators. I think Tito was a dictator. Probably displaying my ignorance. All right, that's that with that then. Moving on. We were walking over the hill. We came down around the coast on the way over, and we decided to cross over the top of this little hill back into town. And I saw this trail out to the old solar array. And of course, I couldn't resist. Also, I mean, look at the view. The water is gorgeous. So now we're up on behind those hotels that were built in the 80s. I was just super curious about what was up here. This was one of two solar arrays. And it was like the late 80s, early 90s. So the solar technology was not what it is today, obviously. But it was probably still pretty good. I guess they spent a lot of money on it. Wasn't that right around when? Oh no, that was Carter. Carter had all the solar panels on the roof. Carter? I forget. All right, I gotta go creep around.